Hello there everyone, how are you doing today? Today we have a story called The Black Cards in store for you. I hope you enjoy. And without further ado, let's get started. I met Archie Palmer for the first time in over 3 years about 2 weeks ago. Predictably enough, I'd crossed paths with him as he stumbled shiftily from a betting shop, where he assured me he had just put down a deposit on 3 dead certs. Judging by Archie's previous success on his dead certs, or rather, his lack of, I was somewhat less than convinced and decided not to take him up on his tips and have a splurge myself. I recognized him immediately, of course. With someone like Archie, it is sort of hard not to. But I think it's safe to say that I'd have recognized any of the old crew was I to pass them on the street. Not that there's much chance of that nowadays, of course. It's not that we were family, colleagues, or even what you might call close friends. But when you go out to the same casino day after day, pass the same machines and tables, see the same people standing as if mesmerized like a snake before a charmer's flute, by the glow of the machine or the dealer's deft hand, you build a sort of camaraderie. Personally, I'd never been one for actually gambling at the casinos. I much prefer to do my gambling with faceless distance of websites like Casino Pilot, or bet on anything where I didn't have to interact with an actual dealer, and didn't have the distractions of my other vices to stop me from winning. I had, however, done a long stretch working on one. The Maurizia Gardens wasn't one of the more well-known casinos, but it was employed all the same tricks. Removing the clocks and making sure that the place didn't have windows, a tactic meant to disorient the punters, removing the usual indicators of hours flying by, so that they all got sucked into losing track of time as well as their money. At first, working in such an environment drove me insane. I had worked boring jobs before where I spent much of the day clock watching, counting minutes till my shift was over. At the time, I thought that was bad. But now I'd take a place where the time is actually measured over, somewhere where it seems to stand still, any day of the week. It was so frustrating to not know whether you had 20 minutes or 2 hours left of your shift that eventually I started to break protocol and smuggle my phone in with me, set to periodic alarms that would vibrate in my pocket and tell me the passing of each hour. One day, Archie noticed those strange vibrations coming from my pocket, and with the desperation of a prisoner who had just heard there was an escape plan, cornered me and asked me to help him. There's a group of us. Come here and here at least 3 times a week. We usually arrive together, but we never leave as a group because one or the other of us always loses track of time. You know what it's like in these places. I nodded. That I did. But I wasn't sure that he thought I could help him with. If you could just give me a nod. Just a tap on the shoulder or a wink. Nothing too over the top, just let me know when your shift is over and then I'll know when it's time to stop and time to go home. I can round up the others and we'll be off together for once. This was my first encounter with Archie, and something about the way he asked so earnestly endeared me to him. I agreed to let him know every time I neared the end of my shift, and over the next 3 years I did exactly that. Every time I would tell him, and every time he would nod back to me in acknowledgement, and to indicate that he'd leave after this run, or once this game was over because he was on a lucky one, or about to hit the jackpot, the machine always being ready to hit the drop of the correct card that had been hiding in the pack, ready to come out. Never once did he and the others leave on time, or together. Seeing him that day, standing outside of the betting shop, I realized that it was the first time I'd seen him in the daylight. He smiled when he saw me, and waved, throwing me that genuine but always slightly apologetic smile common to all addicts. "Hey there, long time no see," he announced loudly. "Must have been seeing you with my bad eye," he joked. Archie, I should explain, had one glass eye that he never seemed to be able to keep facing the same direction as the other. He often joked that he had lost his eye in a game of cards when some Russian gangster, but had confided to me once that he actually lost it in an accident at work, and had been paid a pretty penny in compensation for it. A large chunk of which I was sure he had then used at the capital, at the tables or on the machines. I told him he looked well, and even made a fuss of how much weight he seemed to have put on. In truth, he did seem to have gained around 30 pounds since I last saw him. His hair, for once, seemed to be combed and arranged well, whilst his skin seemed to have lost the sallow, yellowish tinge it always seemed to possess while I saw him at the casino. He explained that he was doing better health-wise recently and attributed it to changing his habits, he told me, as if professing to having remained sober for over a year. Hadn't been in a casino in over 6 months. I'll admit for a moment I wondered whether he was joking with me. But then I realized the time of day, and the fact that in the 3 years I worked at Maurizio Gadenzacci had always been there at this hour. I patted him on the back and said that was probably for the best, and jokingly asked him if all the money had run out. All of a sudden, his smile, which only moments before had been beaming, seemed to slide downwards, as if dragged to the floor by the weight of his thoughts. He went quiet and stared to the ground. "No," he mumbled. "It ain't that. It's just recently, well..." He took a long sigh, and kicking as if distracted at a piece of trash that lay between us, and said, "Well, recently there's been a lot of black card being dealt." He coughed at this statement, as if trying to cover up or mask the fact that he mentioned it at all. I regarded him curiously. Archie himself had been the one who, during one of his few breaks from the tables one day, had originally told me about the black cards. At the time, I thought he'd been playing a joke on me, or having me on. It was only later, when I heard the same, or at least similar versions of the story from others, that I realized it was quite a widespread myth. Even then, I had never expected it to affect Archie quite so much, and certainly not be the type of thing that would finally get him out of the casinos. Talking to him that afternoon, I realized his story hadn't just gotten to him, it had terrified him. He hadn't left the casino because he wanted to. He had left out of fear. The black cards, I should explain, is a curious little myth that seems to circulate only among the denizens of various casinos up and down the country. I have tried looking it up since the library and online, and have only ever found scraps about it that never quite amounted to a full story. This is in contrast to the way it was spoken of within the halls of the casinos, where it is whispered with reverberance and had been such a long-established piece of folklore. that it has multiple versions and variations in detail. The essential idea behind the myth is that the black card, which isn't in fact black at all, but simply named that, can be dealt at any time by any dealer. The general idea is that in a place of suited card, in the traditional club, spades, diamonds, or hearts, the player is dealt a card not from a traditional playing deck, but from the tarot, the death card. Whilst I had been assured by a number of people who use a tarot, and even swear by it as a divining tool, that the death card does not in fact indicate the possibility of a literal death, but rather some period of transition or change. This is not what it means to be playing at the casinos. Any person or persons dealt by the death card by the dealer during a game is said to have less than a few days to live. The black card myth essentially turns every card-based game in every casino into a game of Russian roulette. Every card dealt to you could potentially be the indicator, the one emblazoned with that grinning skeletal visitor, with whom there is no argument and no bargaining. You would assume, of course, that, playing on the superstition, there must have been many dealers over the years who had mixed one of these fabled cards into the deck as a joke. Not so. According to Archie, the black cards myth was taken seriously within the casino world, and any young dealer who decided to try to be funny would be treated with the same level of disdain as a new actor who insisted upon saying the word Macbeth backstage at his first performance. This just wasn't done. Explanations of how the cards actually ended up there in the first place varied. Some say that the dealer who dealt the cards was a witch who, having gained the power to deal these fatal cards, took revenge against the world that had shunned her by getting herself hired as a dealer and doling them out randomly at poker tables across the country. Others said that the dealer was Death himself, that nobody at the table recognized or paid any attention to the dealer when they sat down, but only to their cards and the dealer's hands as they laid the cards out. Only once the fatal black card has been dealt did the others at the table realize that they could not remember the dealer's face or give a description of what he looked like. If asked, and of course, once the card fell, none of them dared to look. According to Archie, when he first told me the story, everybody knew at least one person who had seen a black card or knew somebody who had died because of it. The threat was not enough to put them or the others off going to the table, but the idea did remain there, lurking like a shadow at the back of his mind every time he played. Recently, however, the shadow had grown bigger, heavier, and far closer. Edna, Muriel, and Big Dave, all three of them are gone. These were the characters I knew and remembered from my time at the gardens. Big Dave, as he was sarcastically nicknamed, was a little person who, standing at only around 4 feet, had a special stool set up at one of his tables that he frequented almost every day. I had personally put that chair in a place a few times, and knew Dave, a constant joker, well. News of his passing, as well as those of 2 ladies, made me feel strangely hollow inside. There was, however, according to Archie at least, more to the story. They'd all had one. All had a black card, I mean. Edna was the first, at the poker table. Her scream almost brought the roof in. 2 days later, she was dead. After that, none of the others would play cards at that casino. But a few days later, Dave got one at another place, about a quarter-mile away. He tried to laugh it off and even carried it around with him like it was some sort of joke. Had it sticking out of his breast pocket of his jacket he had always used to wear. Within a week, he died. At his funeral, the rest of us agreed not to go to any casinos in the area, not to sit down at a card table or let anyone deal us a hand for the rest of the next few months. None of us stuck to it, even me. I could feel myself sweating every time a new card was dealt. Something different to the excitement or the fear you got turning over your cards usually. Now I was wondering whether this would be the last time, the last card I would ever be dealt. When I heard that Muriel had gotten one, I went to visit her. I had never seen her outside the casino before, except at Dave's funeral. She seemed like a different person. The following day, she had an aneurysm and died. That was it for me. I haven't been back to a card table since. They say it comes in sixes. 6 people in a small concentration, like one casino or small town. I swore I wouldn't pick up another card until I knew 6 had gone. Apparently there was another one last week. Nobody I knew, but still. Another black card. The fella got up and ran out screaming when he saw it, but the card itself was sold on by somebody who snapped it up. Apparently it was from a very rare deck, from the 1800s in France or Switzerland or somewhere, a proper antique. One card from the whole pack, but worth hundreds. I nodded. That I understood, but as I did, my mind was racing. There was usually 6. 4 had gone, which means there were 2 left. Anyway, where did you just up and disappear to? Where you used to look forward to your shifts. Dave and I used to call you the timekeeper. Then one day you just stopped showing up. I smiled and made up some excuse. Then wished Archie goodbye, saying that it was great to see him, and that maybe he should try to see the sunlight more often. Black card or no black card? In response to his question about abruptly leaving my job, I told him vaguely that I had my reasons. I know you probably don't believe, Archie, that this black card nonsense just sounds like a load of superstitious mumbo-jumbo. To me, though, it sounded like a chance. For the past week, I had visited every casino within a 30-mile radius. I had spent upwards of $10,000 at the card tables, lost 4 more than I won in monetary terms, and never once did I care if I won or lost. I wasn't looking for a win. I was looking for that card. Table after table, hand after hand. With every card I waited and wished, hoping that this time I would not see some brightly colored suit, some hot or diamond, but death, in all of his awful majesty, staring back at me. It was 2 days ago that I had finally found it. A dealer whose face even now I could not describe, and who I could not even identify as a man or woman, swiped it out, who with practiced dexterity towards me, and strangely, even before it was turned over. I knew. Somehow I just knew as I looked at the face-down card. I knew that what was underneath. As if someone or something were communicating with me, letting me know what was to come before it did. The diagnosis had come 2 years ago. In the past, the year the pain had been almost unbearable, and I had quit my job to take care of her. I had watched helpless as the woman I loved turned from a beautiful, confident ball of energy to a twisted, agonized shell, a husk of her former self. I had campaigned for euthanasia, for changes to law, talked with lawyers about my position. I had tried to book flights and a slot at the Dignity's clinic in Switzerland, only for the beer virus and exit from us. She had asked me many times to end it for her, to use a pillow, feed her sleeping pills, or even strangle her, but I couldn't. Whether through cowardice, love, or something else, I simply couldn't bring myself to end her life, to give her the one thing she wanted more than anything. As I watched her turn the card, struggling as she did nowadays to control her hands, I heard those around us shriek. One woman began to wail whilst another crossed herself and threw down her cards, pushing away the table as if it were on fire. The other hand simply stared down at the grinning death's hand, at the hollow, nothing of its pit eyes, emptier than the space within a zero, and saw within the black it contained an immense and never-ending well of mercy. I turned to my wife, and mirroring the skull that stared out from the card, both of us broke into a smile. That was the black card. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe to keep death at bay.